This is Donald Parham. You're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LAFB Network. Stay jiggy.
Hey, this is Chris Rupp II, Chargers outside linebacker, and make sure you check out Chargers Unleashed. Shout out to Chargers Unleashed, Sebastian Joseph. They know the vibes. We outside.
You checking in with Mike Williams from the LA Chargers, and you're tuning in to Chargers Unleashed.
You're listening to the Chargers Unleashed podcast with your host, Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, being brought to you by BetOnline, Charger Bowl Family, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein. It is Tuesday, April 4th. We are 23 days away.
I knew you had that ticker just ready to go.
If it was good enough to where this brain could literally be counting the seconds, I probably would have gone that in-depth to it, but I'm not that big of a psycho. But we are still 23 days away from the 2023 NFL Draft. We've got it. It's weird, Dan, because I know that's just, it's just 3 short weeks away. Like it happens every single year. For the draft pundits, for the draft nicks like Dan and I, the draft psychos that are out there who even delve into more stuff than we do at a professional level. From today to the 27th is going to feel like a damn eternity. It's going to be dragged out so long that we're just waiting for Christmas to get here, and it's going to feel like it's going to take forever. But until then, Dan Wolkenstein, we're going to shift a little bit of the gears here a little bit with a different subject matter that came up to today that was actually just released from the Chargers website. Dan, talk to us a little bit about what we're getting into today.
So, thankfully, the Chargers social media team and their digital content team is among the best in the industry, not just in sports, but in the industry. And they came out today. Brett Kollman, who recently aligned with the Chargers, I believe he does the Film Room, has his own YouTube channel, and also does some stuff for the Chargers now, came out with a 2-part series. Part 1 is now launched. I think part 2 is coming up, where they dive into the Chargers offense and what it's going to look like under new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. And they get into the weeds, and they get into the great weeds. And the first one came out today, which focused on the running game. And there is a lot to take away from this. For folks who have not gone and seen it, please go check it out. The Chargers put up on their social media. You can see it on their YouTube. I'm sure you subscribe to it. So much was talked about, and I think so much was not talked about that if you read between the lines, which we're going to do today, there are mighty implications when it comes to roster, when it comes to scheme, when it comes to personnel groupings you might see, an overall mindset that the Chargers offense will most likely take with it in 2023 alongside of Kellen Moore. So all things rushing game for the Chargers 2023 edition under new Kellen Moore. That's what we're talking about today. Jake, before we get into this, over or under how many tight ends the Chargers are going to take in this year's draft now that you've watched this video?
Man, way to bury the lead with your line here.
Let me change it. Over under 1.5 rounds before a tight end is taken.
That's better. God, people are probably screaming at the screen right now based on the social argument that has been made with the tight end position and the priorities for the Chargers going into this draft.
You're not wrong.
So you said over under 1.5 for the rounds. I'll go over on that. I just think I'm still steadfast in my priorities for the Chargers in the draft. And again, this tight end class is deep. It's one of the best that we've seen in years. And as we get into this discussion about Brett Kollman's breakdown video, it may just give you a little bit better of an idea as far as where the tight end position is going to be prioritized for the Chargers.
Don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messengers.
Exactly. We're not saying it. We're just dissecting somebody else.
We're saying what they said and then dissecting that.
Yes, exactly.
But Jake, talk about our friends over at BetOnline real quick. Then we get into all of the goodness that we saw today.
So we will remind you guys once again that BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season. As your continued source for all sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. So everybody head on over to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. And make sure to use that promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So, Brett Kollman came out with part one, focusing on the run game for this 2023 Chargers team and what to look for and some of the things that might be glaring that Chargers fans should be ready for, whether it's roster-wise, whether it's scheme-wise, play selection, but also, I think more importantly, to top it off, to kind of start it out, Jake, mentality. Brett Kollman talked about right off the top the two things that he saw most when it comes to a Kellen Moore offense, specifically the run game, are two things: aggression and adaptability.
You know, Dan, I always say that it's always the simplest things in movies or stories or anything like that. You just break it down to simplicity, and that is the hook that should get everybody's attention.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, that's what got my attention, and that's what should get Charger fans' attention everywhere. Aggressiveness and adaptability, two things that unfortunately, under an old offensive coordinating regime, that they lacked severely. And especially when we talk about adaptability, Dan, I don't know how many times I said it through the duration of the 2022 season.
You needed a button,
so
right?
Many times, so many times, whether it was in a win or a loss, it just seemed like this Chargers team failed to adapt at certain moments of the game, whether it was in the second half when they had a lead, certain crucial points in the game that they were not able to see what the opposing defense was throwing at them, and they just kept running the same exact thing, hoping for a different result. And the last time I checked, the definition of that was insanity. So what is it that the Chargers are going to do? And to Brett Kollman's credit, again, eyes up, ears open, aggression and adaptability sounds pretty damn good for a offensive coordinator standpoint of what Kellen Moore is planning on bringing.
And applying that to what we've seen in the Chargers and what that means. Like, we've seen aggression from this Chargers team as a whole. You know, we talk about like the 4th and Staley's. We talk about some of the things that we've seen where that's one of the culture things that Brandon Staley wants to bring. But from like a play selection and from a coordination perspective, specifically on offense, I don't think we've seen that. And that's been some of the things that the Chargers fans have been clamoring for. We talk about like how vanilla the Chargers are, how predictable they are when it comes to the running game, passing game, playing before, after the sticks. Like, there's really not much progressions that the Chargers can go through, not much complexity, and we've seen it kind of affect them. Kellen Moore is different. And they talked about in this episode, Jake, they talked about some of the reasons why Kellen Moore, or some of the results Kellen Moore has brought. He talked about, I think it's the fourth in points per game last year as offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, 5th and 3rd down conversions. And the one that I thought was most important, where the Chargers sucked, was red zone efficiency, specifically touchdowns, number 1 in the NFL in 2022. That's what he's bringing to the Los Angeles Chargers offense, and specifically the running game is where we're going to probably see the biggest difference in my eyes year to year. Because overall, say what you will about the style of offense for the passing side, the Chargers passing game was still pretty productive. It might look vanilla, it might not look great, but like, go back, look at the stats. Like, the guy had 5,000 yards passing. We had a ton of guys with receiving yards, touchdowns, you name it. The running game was not good a lot with the Chargers, and it hasn't been for quite some time. Running game under Kellen Moore is very good. So that's going to be the thing that we're going to see quite a bit of a difference in year over year. And I'm excited for it. The Chargers need to have an efficient running game. Many ways to go about getting that. I think that's where Brett Kollman kind of got into the weeds here, which was super exciting. And the level of detail that he brought was something that I was refreshed by.
Oh, I thought you were going to keep going. I was just basically putting my 2 cents. It was awesome. It really was. Just this entire breakdown as far as like, hey, look, if you ever want to just learn football 101, if this is the first football video that you are ever going to watch as far as how a run game is produced, I mean, this felt like something you would read in a playbook, just digitally explained to you. It was really that good and that well thought out and well explained by Brent Kollman on this. And in terms of just him talking about different ways that the Cowboys offense under Kellen Moore attacked opposing defenses in different formations that they were in. But more importantly, Dan, even in a situation where defenses were ready for it, how they were able to adapt later in the game and still find success in the running game, which the Chargers obviously had very few and far between as far as their successes went in the running game in 2022.
It was fascinating to kind of see how Brett laid out this Chargers running game, or most likely what Chargers running game is going to look like based on what Kellen Moore's offense looked like last year. And they got into a whole bunch of different technical terms. And if you want to get into that, go for it. Get the concept. I think that's what matters. And one of the things that Chargers fans might think is, well, why are we putting this out there? We don't want other teams to know what we're doing. This is stupid. Now all of a sudden everybody has a playbook and they're going to be able to beat the Chargers offense and know what we're doing. Wrong. And as Brett Kollman laid out, it doesn't matter if the Chargers opponents know what the Chargers are doing, as long as the Chargers can execute and have the right play called to attack it. So it doesn't matter if they know the Chargers are running. If the Chargers have the right play call, they're going to be successful regardless. They explain exactly why. But one of the things I thought was really interesting with this, Jake, was they talked about kind of the tendencies that Kellen Moore and the offense had in Dallas last year, and specifically around some of like the personnel groupings. And, overall, it was a pretty balanced offense. 47% run to pass ratio for the Cowboys last year. But when you look at specific groupings and personnel, that's where things become pretty telling.
There was a big difference between 12 personnel and 11 personnel as far as how often they ran the ball. I can't remember what it was on 11 personnel, but I think he said it was just over 63% of the time that they were in 12 personnel.
Yep,
that they ran the football. But the problem is with the Chargers, when you dissect this, and what's really going to have to be the overhaul on this, is that you don't have very many good tight ends that can block on this team. So that's where the Chargers severely need to improve. You had drafted Trey McKitty for this very reason, considering what he was known for in college, and he hasn't quite gotten there yet. Obviously, Jared Everett is known more for his pass-catching capability. And Donald Parham, who the Chargers unfortunately didn't have for the most of last year, never really got many opportunities to block because he wasn't on the field. So a lot of things need to be worked out in the running game as it relates to the tight ends in these type of formations.
Yeah, so just to kind of give a quick overview. 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. 11 personnel, you have 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. So in the 2 tight end sets, Jake, they ran, like you said, over 63.4% of the time they ran when there were 2 tight end sets. Now, 1 tight end set, they ran 32%. Like about half of the time. So generally, when there are 3 receivers on the field or more, they're passing. Generally, when there are 2 tight ends on the field, they're running at least 64%. And so I think what's important to note here is roster, what the Chargers currently have, and what a Kellen Moore offense typically has. Kellen Moore offense typically has tight ends that can block. You mentioned it. They've also got pretty versatile tight ends that can do more than just blocking, or at least have some that can do both. The Chargers don't have 3 that can do that. You could argue they might have 1. Like Donald Parham, I think, is a great blocker. I don't know how much they're going to put him out of the backfield, if we're being honest, as a blocker / out in the flats, go out and do something deep down the field. Trey McKitty, the opposite. Trey McKitty is a run blocker. But doesn't have hands right now, at least that we've seen. Gerald Everett, I think, is probably the one who's most versatile, where you can say he could do a little bit of both. Granted, he's much better at the catch point than he is blocking, but still, he could do it. So there's some ramifications of, well, I know they re-signed Donald Parham. That does not mean they're not going tight end in this draft. And I would argue it probably increases the likelihood that they're going tight end, because I don't think you can count on Trey McKitty being your 3rd one, which realistically, if they're running this set this often, 10th most in the NFL, by the way, they're going to need to revamp. The tight end is probably the running game too, the running backs. We'll see on the running back side, but how they develop the tight end and the blocking schemes, I think, is going to be crucial. That's probably more important to the backs behind him, in my opinion.
I go back to this, Dan, because I was thinking about a lot of things as in relation to, especially what Brett Kollman said later in the video, basically saying, if the Chargers want to run the ball, this was his quote, if the Chargers want to run the ball this year, they're going to run it. And he continued that statement by saying, you just need the right coaching mind to be able to implement and the players to execute properly. And I truly felt that getting back to a more balanced attack was originally Brandon Staley's plan last year. And you can look at a number of different things based off comments that he made in the media. Obviously, from what we had seen from Justin Herbert the previous year, it just felt like he had to play Superman or hero ball all the time just to even bring the Chargers back, and not every time did that result in a win. But then if you looked at their offseason moves that they made last year, obviously Joshua Kelly was more improved in the run game, still not to the level that we were hoping to have seen, but that was a nice jump from where he was the year prior. Chargers went out and they drafted Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round. Unfortunately, he barely even saw the field. And of course, the offensive line had a lot to do with the fact that the Chargers were not able to execute their running game that well. You lose Rashawn Slater. That's huge piece number 1. Corey Linsley, Trey Pipkins are in and out of the lineups with injuries. Matt Filer's a little bit inconsistent when he's playing next to Jamari Sawyer as opposed to Rashawn Slater. This year, when you look at the offensive line, it's just, okay, there is finally some real continuity that you have for Justin Herbert up front. And you talk about a left side that is now going to have Rashawn Slater and Zion Johnson blocking for you. I mean, again, I still would have been just fine if you were to tell me that it was going to be Rashawn Slater and Jamari Sawyer.
Same. I agree.
And maybe for just the aspect of familiarity for them, that's the only reason that I have an issue with it. But I get it from a coaching standpoint, because you go back to the Georgia days of Jamari Sawyer, and he played right guard outside of playing left tackle majority of the time. So maybe he's just familiar at that position a little bit more. And truly, I think that maybe even gives a little bit more balance to Trey Pipkins on the right side as well. So now you have these 5 pieces in front of you. And now if you can go out and execute properly with more blocking tight ends as far as being that extra dose to really get this run game going, this is an interesting concept to think about as we head into not just the draft, but beyond, and how the Chargers are going to execute this as we get closer to the regular season. Because, Dan, we've talked about 2 tight end sets for the last 2 years, going back to when Jared Cook was on this team. And we never saw it in the way that we thought we were going to see.
Especially in the red zone.
Especially in the red zone. And there's one tight end that is no longer on this team that I feel like if he still was here, that he would just absolutely thrive in this position. And that was Steven Anderson. Steven Anderson was your tight end, your halfback, your fullback, and to the credit of the offense during that point in time, they used him so creatively that I think that if he was still here, you could automatically assume that he would have had an expanded role in Kellen Moore's offense. Mm-hmm. So as much as people want to negate to say, the Chargers shouldn't be taking a tight end in round 1, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but when you have players like Gerald Everett and Donald Parham, and then when you connect the dots to what Kellen Moore wants to do, there is a little bit of a gap there as far as what needs to be filled.
Yeah, and Brett Kollman went on to talk about kind of the out of 11 personnel, so out of the 2 tight end sets, they would be running it outside zone 38% of the time. So what that means is, from a gap scheme perspective, the running back and the offensive lineman all kind of push out to the outside, and then you'll have the running back looking for gaps, starting from the outside, working his way back in. And so, in my eyes, immediately I think to processor for running backs. And do the Chargers have those style running backs on the team? Ekeler's that guy. I think Ekeler's very good. I think he's a very quick, great with kind of vision, that kind of stuff. I'm higher on Isaiah Spiller than I think other people are, specifically with this type of scheme. The one cut go. I'm not saying Isaiah Spiller is Ezekiel Elliott, but the style in which they run is similar. The archetype is similar. And I think that archetype thrives in this new style offense. Could they improve and go get a Bijan Robinson or go get somebody faster? Who knows? Sure, they could. I don't necessarily know if they need to. I don't. I don't think they need to yet. Unknown, maybe. But do they know they need to? No, in my opinion. So I found it fascinating him talking about the difference between the 2 tight end and the 1 tight end sets and how frequently the Chargers will most likely run versus pass. The part that I find most refreshing and rejuvenating is previously Chargers would come out and you would know that they're running, but ultimately you also knew where they were running and how they were running. Like the play call itself was so predictable. Not the case with this new running scheme, or at least that we've seen previously with Kellen Moore. That's what makes it so effective. You go back to the adaptability perspective. There are so many different ways you can run out of one formation. That is where I believe Kellen Moore's smarts has allowed him to excel so far, is the way he's able to be adaptable and aggressive simultaneously. He'll notice early on, there's an example in the video where I think they're going up against the Bengals, and the Bengals are putting up a specific front that was giving the Cowboys offensive line and running game fits. They adapted late in the game, gashed them to the point where they basically just gave up on that because it wasn't working anymore. That's exciting to me. Like, I think you think of proactive versus reactive, and are you the guy that's going to react to someone else, or are you going to be the one that's going to force someone else to react? In my eyes, the Chargers offense seemed like they were reactive all the time. Not so much anymore. It seems like they're going to have pedal to the metal aggressiveness. That's kind of been Kellen Moore's staple the entire time he's been offensive coordinator, even back to when he was a quarterback in Boise State. Like, that's him. Now, sometimes that can get you into trouble, but I think that's what this Chargers team needs. Someone who's not going to kind of go vanilla, not going to try to run out the clock and try to put other teams away. And I don't remember who was talking about this, but Jake, did you hear about this? Somewhat related, that talking about, like, you played so you can get like a manageable third down, like first and second down are there so you can have like a third and short. And like philosophically, to me, it seems like Kellen Moore's like, F that. Like, the goal is score touchdowns. If I can do it in one play, if I can do it in 2 plays, sweet. Doesn't matter. I don't care. Like, the goal of third and shorts is very conservative. Like, chunk plays don't necessarily need to happen to get third and shorts. Like, that doesn't compute that way. Like, the goal is to go.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off that, I think maybe it was in Popper's postseason report. I could have sworn it was either Popper or somebody else that wrote that the Chargers, as far as first down goes, was one of the worst as far as gaining yards in the entire league. So if you can't start off on the right foot and getting positive yards on first down, then your whole philosophy is basically getting thrown out the window as far as, oh yeah, let's make it third and manageable. Obviously, everybody knows that. You would much rather be in a 3rd and 4 situation than a 3rd and 8, but still, to what the point that you're making, Dan, like, screw that. Like, I want to convert a first down on first down. Like, I don't care. Let's just go.
Yeah. So Kellen Moore kind of talked about Brett Kollman talked about Kellen Moore's philosophy of wanting to have 12 personnel, again, 2 tight end sets, bigger bodies, a wider, what did he call it? I think it's a wider surface area on the line of scrimmage, which basically gives the offensive line, the tight ends, blockers, whoever it is, and the running backs more of a space to work with and develop their play. From a bigger body perspective, think about the Chargers tight end group now and think about what they could go for. Like, you think bigger body, Darnell Washington, for example, would be money in this sort of offense that we're possibly looking at. Michael Mayer will look great in this style of offense. I think Dalton Kincaid would look great. He kind of have like that Dalton Schultz archetype, if you will. Everyone talked about Travis Kelce. We'll see. But he has that versatility mold. But man, personally, when I saw this and I was kind of thinking through, all right, what does this mean for the Chargers? I was like, man, like personally, stock on Darnell Washington being the pick at 21 went up for me. I'm not saying it's highly likely, but the chances of it went up given this new information.
I know what it is that you're saying, Dan, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you on this, but so many Charger fans are basically just hitting the emergency break glass right now button because Dan Wolkenstein brought up again the fact that the Chargers taking a tight end at 21, which look, this philosophy and this video by Brett Kollman, as far as what he's bringing up, I think is terrific as far as giving you just kind of little hints as far as what to expect from the Chargers this season. But obviously there is a big gap in what they need to do to improve it, not just on coaching, execution, whatever, but you need the right personnel also. And in the Chargers case, currently they don't have that. Now, does that necessarily mean that the Chargers are going to 100% select a tight end in the first round of the draft? No. What Dan is saying is absolutely correct as far as if you just want to take it at a surface level as far as which tight ends would succeed in this system, saying, 3 out of the top 4 guys that are there right now in Kincaid, Mayer, and Washington, then yes, that makes complete sense. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to target a tight end in the first round. There are a lot of tight ends in this draft that I feel that if you brought in with that type of blocking scheme and that they're successful in that the Chargers could target anywhere between whether it's round 1 to 4.
Tucker Kraft, by the way, also fits beautifully.
Well, I mean, he fits from an athletic skill set on a lot of different things, but
yes.
So but yes, you can sense now that the Chargers will end up prioritizing tight end. It just may not be at the top, depending on who's left on the board. So it's kind of let's just say I would put it maybe as a 60-40 as far as maybe a 70-30 that they don't target tight end in the first round. But again, we don't know how the board's going to fall.
But still, the fact that you can say 30% chance that they're going to go with a specific position, like that's pretty high. And does it mean they're not going receiver? No. All this does is showcase how important the tight end position is to this upcoming Chargers running game, most likely. We're going to get into in a future episode kind of like draft strategy and when to take different positions and all that kind of stuff. But for folks out there who are going crazy about like they're hearing us talk about these tight ends and tight end 21 and they're just want to bring their pitchforks out, the Chargers can get wide receiver arguably any of the first 4 rounds, and that one selection could probably revolutionize the wide receiver room. Like there are guys in each round who can bring something to this Chargers wide receiving core that they do not have. Speed. So
I'm sure a lot of people who watched the Brett Kollman video today and then listened to the gibber that Dan and I are talking about right now, their immediate thought was, well, we got to go get Bijan Robinson at 21. Look.
Do you think is it more or less likely now that you saw the video? Bijan at 21.
Look,
to me it's less. Honestly, to me it's less.
I won't necessarily say less because again, Bijan bucks the trend for first round running backs. To add a tight end to add a running back of that caliber of Bijan Robinson, 32 teams would love to have a Bijan Robinson on their team.
Of course.
I don't necessarily think that it means less, but it does give you kind of an example to say, this is how you can make a running back, not necessarily Bijan Robinson, that's a running back successful in this scheme. It doesn't matter who the running back is. Really,
thank you.
LT did not have the Hall of Fame season that he had in 2006 without the offensive line and his tight ends blocking for him, and of course, Lorenzo Neal. So if you could get the right people creating holes for you, it really doesn't matter all that much about who the running back is.
You said it. You said it, not me.
Whether
you
that's
said it.
Bijan or anybody else.
I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying the way that, like, you watch the video, no one's talking about, like, how incredible the running backs are, other than they talk about, like, the vision they need to be able to dissect.
And to make a point of this so that Dan doesn't get all the pitchforks coming after him in this, basically saying if the choices on the board were Bijan Robinson and Michael Mayer, Dan, who are you taking?
God dang it! between those two, honestly, between those two, I'd probably taken Bijan Robinson.
There you go. Just making sure. You redeemed yourself a little bit more off of the mock draft last week, so I just wanted to verify in a scenario that came down to it, if Bijan Robinson happened to drop to 21,
look at you!
What would Dan Wolkenstein?
God dang it! So, look, want to give out a quick episode, just kind of go through the recapping what this meant. It was a great video. Again, if you have not gone and seen it, go check out Brett Kollman's film room that he did on the Chargers running game. This episode, I think the next one's going to be on the passing game. Really, really good stuff. The Chargers content team is incredible. So, Jake, anything else you want to tell the great friends before we head out of here? I know we went into a whole bunch of specifics and gibberish and 12 personnel and 11 personnel. And, we talked about bare fronts and all kinds of crap that was on this. Anything else before we head out of here?
Can it just be April 27th? That's all I need right now. I know I've said it a few times before, and I normally say it during draft season. I need the DeLorean, and I need the DeLorean now.
Okay, well, I want to sing that song, but I have a terrible voice, so I'm not going to do it. But you all know what song I'm thinking. You got what I need. Jake, you can find him at Jake D. Hefner, myself at Dan W. Sports. Guys, gals, thank you so much for tuning in to Chargers Unleashed. This has been a fun one. We'll talk to you next time as we go through all things draft strategy, who to draft, where to draft, when to draft, all that coming up next.